I'm Anne Ormsbee, and Conrad is my husband. We would like to recount an event involving his family in 1942, but first, a little background. During the Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt initiated and developed many programs identified by those myriad capital letters aimed at assisting Americans with the many challenges of the 1930s. One such program was the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, the AAA, created to address the plight of rural Americans and farmers. One subset of the AAA was the Farm Security Administration, or FSA, and one of its divisions, the Historical Section of the Information Division, sent photographers around the country showing how the Depression affected rural folks. The premise was that photos could illustrate abstract social problems and economic theories much more clearly than essays and reports. Photographers such as Ben Shawn, Walker Evans, and Dorothea Lange created an archive of arresting pictures of devastated land, migrant farm workers, and a destitute people. Some of those photos are familiar to this day. After World War II began, the FSA and its historical section evolved into the Office of War Information. Among the many aspects of depicting the U.S. at war, photos showing rural and urban residents' support of the war effort were taken and offered to newspapers and magazines for publication. One such photo section occurred on June 13, 1942, at the farm where Conrad grew up. We don't know how the Ormsbee Farm was selected, but Conrad's dad, Charles, was known as an innovator. He was a member of the Farm Bureau. He participated in agricultural conservation programs, as well as the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or the USDA, the Extension Service. In this case, Washington County Extension Agricultural Agent Gordon Lovelace may have been the link. Conrad's mother, Myrtle, in her diary entry of December 31, 1941, wrote, "I am very afraid." This may have been the feeling of most of the country. Then, on June 13, 1942, she wrote, "A photographer took pictures of us this p.m. They were getting pictures showing the average farm family in the war effort. They took lots of pictures of us at different tasks." Now Conrad will comment on those pictures.
As an 11-year-old, I was well aware of how my community was being affected by the war. We were being asked to do things that we hadn't done before, and a photo shoot was just another one of those things. I don't remember excitement, but perhaps curiosity. Approaching the farm from the north on Center Road in 2020, the view is much the same because the land is conserved. Gordon Lovelace, in the straw hat, was the Washington County Extension Agricultural Agent. His duties included encouraging farmers to use the latest soil, plant, and animal practices for increased production. This room was under construction, thus the crude appearance. The 10-gallon milk cans were used to transport milk to the creamery before bulk tanks were used locally. These long tube machines had been reassembled since the morning washing. This is a wood floor stable on the second level with 34 tie-ups, built in 1908. The cows are Jerseys, and they fill the stable. Soon after this, to quickly increase milk production, Dad bought a couple Holsteins, but they were too large for the stable and stood with their hind feet in the gutter half the time. This photo was printed backward. but I did milk cows. Jersey herds are very common in Vermont during this period because a premium was paid for the high butterfat content of the milk that they produced. This calf was shown at the Washington Orange County Field Day at Goddard College the next summer, and she was chosen the best of show. I had been shown many grooming trips by Irving Welton, who worked for my dad, including how to shape a growing horn on an animal to make them match. I recall that I periodically scraped the area of the horn that needed to grow faster using a piece of broken glass. Unfortunately, later as a milking cow, she was mediocre. Back in the milk room after milking is finished, the machines have been rinsed and stored. The walls show pine knots where painting has not yet been done. Mr. Lovelace had recently become a resident of East Montpelier and a friend of the family after buying the Kelton farm at auction for $4,780. Later it was owned by the Dunklings. The stamps, selling for 25 cents, were collected in a book until the amount reached $18.75. The book could then be exchanged at a bank or the post office for a bond that would mature at a value of $25. There were higher denomination bonds as well. My mother appears to be working on records, perhaps farm or perhaps related to off-farm wartime volunteer work. Knitting for home use or the Red Cross was common. This photo, taken on the back porch, was staged to take advantage of the afternoon light, but Murdy wasn't happy. A farmer's back porch is where the burn boots come and go, not a place to sit and knit. Knitting for the Red Cross was not limited to the elderly. Children in elementary school knit 6-inch squares, which are combined to make afghans. I learned to knit at the center school for this purpose. Marilyn is just passing through. She was going to or coming from a neighborhood 4-H club meeting. Richard was just hanging out. Bonding with your grandmother on the back porch is fun for a 5-year-old. Even though it was only mid-June, I'm sure there was more garden than this because we participated in the Victory Garden program and had a large garden. Potatoes were grown in a separate location. By coincidence, there was a meeting of the neighborhood girls' 4-H club that day at the John Badger home, later Carol Badger. From the left of the leader, William Schaefer Johnson, Marilyn, Marion Kimball, Elsie Erickson Conti, Marion Schaefer Palmer, and Frieda Badger Scribner. In the foreground is Louise Evett Bothfeld. The club's emphasis was on cooking and sewing in wartime. About this time, some of the grain delivered to farmers came in colorful printed cotton bags that could be made into aprons and so forth. Louise Evett's father was Raymond Evett, who was very involved in the formation of the Adamant Co-op store and the Adamant Credit Union. Back to the camera is Marilyn, and at the far end is Irving Welton, my dad's hired man and my cattle showing advisor. This is another stage shot. About 2 weeks earlier, Charles had collected 3,000 pounds of scrap metal from his and nearby farms. All metal down to the foil from gum or tobacco wrappers was saved. Aluminum was vital. Also rubber from tractor tires down to rubber bands. School children collected mature milkweed pods, which were used to fill life preservers. These next photos are not by Henley, but by photographers unknown. About 2 months after the Henley visit, a building used as a playhouse for us children and our friends became an airplane observer facility. With wood heat, electric lights, and communication by the existing party line telephone, they were in business. The tower was added by volunteers, including the cone-shaped listening horns. There were others in neighboring towns. All were staffed by volunteers. In this location, usually 2 men in the nighttime from the city, and during the day by women from nearby. I don't recall how long that lasted. Another thing of interest to me that summer was the basic training of pilots nearby, using the facilities of Norwich University and the Vermont Airport. Flying small Piper Cub-type aircraft, they often flew low over the hayfields like ours, to my delight. Perhaps that's why, a decade later, I chose to serve my military duty in the Air Force.